This is an Alienware desktop from late 2020. It's currently February 2025, and could you believe it? This thing still has some of its plastic peels on the system itself. You have the front, and I think you could see the one right here on the bottom on the side. Tell me you're Asian without telling me you're Asian. Now, this is a desktop that belongs to a friend of a friend, and they wanted to upgrade the graphics card and the system memory in order to play some simulator games like F1 and Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, I've never played around with an Alienware desktop, but as far as I know, some of the components might be difficult to upgrade. It might be proprietary because it's partially Dell. So I don't really know what to expect going to upgrading the system. For the GPU, we're going to be upgrading to the RTX 3070 Ventus. Hopefully this will work without any problems because this doesn't use the newer power connector found on like the 40 series or 50 series graphics cards. Instead, it uses two 8-pins for the power connector, and I'm hoping that the power supply for the graphics card here has two 8-pins and not an 8 and a 6. If it only has one 8 and one 6 for the PCIe power, we might be in a bit of trouble and we might have to pick this up at a later time. Originally, the plan was to upgrade the system memory to 32 gigabytes of RAM, but I just realized the two sticks that I have here are 8 gigabyte sticks each for a total of 16 gigabytes. At least for now, why don't we open up the Alienware desktop and see what's inside. Oh, okay. Okay, this is what I meant by, not necessarily by proprietary, but just a bit annoying. So right off the bat, you can see that this isn't really a normal desktop case. The power supply is mounted on the side panel here or just above the motherboard. Normally in off-the-shelf cases, the power supply was more likely in the bottom. Before it was probably in the top. Now with the newer fish tank styles, there's maybe like a back chamber, but I think to have it hovering over the motherboard like this and like on top of the GPU, not very common in off-the-shelf mid-tower cases. This I think is a 2070 Super, and luckily enough, this thing has two 8-pins or 6+2 PCIe power cable connectors. We're in luck. We should be able to just swap out this GPU with the Ventus 3070 and we should be good to go on the GPU front. Try to remove this GPU. This thing comes with a GPU bracket, which is actually kind of nice. I don't think it's super necessary unless you're shipping this, so maybe this would help to lock it in place. I just want to close this really quick to show the difference between the 2070 Super and the 4080 Founders Edition that I have. Just look at the size difference between the 2070 Super and the 4080 Super. Well, we're not gonna put the 4080 in there. Just set the 2070 off to the side. I think one thing that I will do today is just quickly take off the CPU cooler, inspect the thermal paste, see if it's dried out. I'm pretty sure it's dried out. I'll clean it off and apply some new thermal paste to it. Oh yeah, that looks pretty dried. I don't know if you can see all that well. Yeah, there's not a lot of room to perform maintenance on this. Alright. I think that's enough thermal compound. Thermal paste refreshed. I don't know what happened with the system before, but this, according to this Kingston memory, this is a 16 gigabyte kit, a 2x8 gig set, but there's only one stick in here. One stick of 8 gigabytes for a gaming system, that's really not recommended. Out of curiosity, before we throw in the new GPU, I want to throw in 2 sticks of 8 for a total of 16 gigabytes, just to see if the overall system would perform better. So the game is set to 4K 3840 by 2160. After finishing the benchmark with 16 gigabytes memory, there is an improvement, but it's very, very minimal. Out of curiosity, let's plug in the other 2 sticks for a total of 32 gigabytes. Now this is actually pretty surprising. I wasn't expecting this result. With 32 gigabytes of memory, I was expecting the performance to be roughly the same. But according to my benchmarking results, having 4 sticks of 8 gigabytes for a total of 32 gigabytes, we're actually losing performance when comparing to just 2 sticks of 8 for a 16. When I first installed the 3070, the F1 game automatically switched the preset to ultra high preset, whereas when I was using the 2070 Super, it was defaulting to high preset. When running an ultra high preset compared to the 2070 Super and the high preset, I'm not getting as many frames, but there's a lot more detail. There's a lot more rain effects, there's a lot more particles. Now, when I dropped it down from ultra high to just the high preset, the 3070 outperformed the 2070 Super by 3 more frames for minimum FPS, 10 more frames for average. The frame time also went down in general. It is a smoother gaming experience, and the total frames generated was 26,000, whereas with the 2070 Super was 21,000. Interestingly though, with all 4 sticks of memory installed for a total of 32 gigabytes, the performance is much worse compared to when it's just 2 sticks of 16 gigs. I don't know exactly why that is. I would really not recommend the owner of this PC to run with all 32 gigabytes. It's a new day. I took another crack at testing the system with another set of memory sticks. Each of these sticks are 16 gigabytes. I have a total of 4 of them, so I could install 64 gigs. But what seems to perform the best, at least within F1, is 2 sticks of memory. When I plug in all 4 sticks, frames will still drop pretty consistently. Judging based off this benchmarking, the maximum frame time goes all the way up to 72 milliseconds, even though the minimum and average frame time is lower compared to just 2 sticks. But on the 2 sticks of memory, the maximum frame time only goes up to 19.32 milliseconds. So that's a really huge difference in maximum frame time. In my opinion, even though with the 4 sticks of memory for a total of 64 gigs, there are more frames being generated, there are more maximum frames, and your average FPS is higher, but your minimum FPS drops all the way down to 13. So I think that's a very jarring, bad experience, especially when you're playing a driving simulator. I think this might be as good as it gets. I tried updating the BIOS, it didn't work, and I'm not entirely sure if XMP is enabled on this system. It's a really weird behavior that it would drop so many frames with 4 sticks installed versus 2. I'm not really all that technical enough to know why or how to resolve it, or if it's just very specific to F1. Because within Microsoft Flight Simulator, it seemed to run okay. So it could just be very game specific to F1. But overall, I think in the end, the 3070 and the 2 sticks of 16 gigabytes of memory was a pretty good upgrade to the system overall. If you enjoyed this video, I appreciate if you liked the video, but if you didn't like it, go ahead and dislike it. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.